Welcome back to Africa 54. Most Africans depend on their land for survival. However, across the continent, land ownership is complicated. To find out why, we turn to Africa 54's Paul Ndiho. Paul.
Thanks, Vincent. Antiquated land registration systems have been holding back the economic development of sub-Saharan African countries. This is certainly true in Uganda, with only 20% of the land legally registered. Land disputes are on the rise. But in the last couple of years, the government decided to overhaul its land management and land administration system. I recently traveled to Uganda to find out why. I had heard the buzz about a pilot computerized land reform management system being put into place in my country, Uganda. The old land registration system has been a drag on development. The country's population has grown exponentially in the last decade, and that's putting enormous pressures on the land. Amadra Ori Okida is an independent consultant hired by the government to help introduce a modernized system.
All the documents related to land registration were actually in the very poor situation. The filing, the organizations, you could see heaps and heaps and heaps of documents.
The government is implementing a state-of-the-art system designed and implemented by Thomson Reuters and its partners. I'm here in the capital, Kampala, to ask the experts and senior government officials to explain the new land information system and its benefits to the public. The goal is to bring services closer to the people and increase accountability. The old manual system dates back to the colonial era, as you can see here at the National Land Records Office in Entebbe.
If you want to work for Eastern region, you come in this, so that you know where to go. It's like when you're in a computer, you keep your things in folders. So this is our folder in terms of the computer systems.
The Ugandan government is betting that this new computerized system will end its land disarray and corruption in its land registry.
Could not track who had what title, what had been issued, let alone the problem of multiple titles where a number of titles were issued on the same piece of land.
Under the old manual system, it took days or weeks for the public to get the documents that they wanted. The public deeply disliked having to pay bribes to get the job done.
What was happening before? You presented in a district, your documents then went to Entebbe to Kampala, Kampala back to the district. They tell you, oh, go back again, and all kinds of, and sometimes you're not able to complete this. Many people would give up.
The new system, there are no more deteriorating paper deeds. Within 8 months of startup, the ministry staff digitized more than 500,000 of these old paper titles. They also scanned torn and tattered maps. According to the Minister of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Daudi Mijereko.
When you look at the way the information is presently stored, when you consider the amount of time it takes to retrieve information, I think we have made a major breakthrough, because we were dealing with volumes and volumes of paper.
The commissioner in charge of lands, Sala Kulata Basangwa, believes the investment will greatly reduce land disputes and promote economic growth.
Everyone will have confidence in the document of ownership. Then people will invest more. Banks will accept this document more and more. They will do less due diligence than they have been doing before lending.
The new system has eliminated the backlog of unprocessed land registrations. Remember Uganda's rapid population that I mentioned earlier, and how it challenged the economic future of the country. Well, the new land information system is laying the foundation for addressing those challenges. I'm optimistic that this reform will lead to growth for Uganda. Now joining us to talk about land reforms in Africa and the significance of this year's World Bank Conference on Land and Poverty is Mr. Keith Nichols, Managing Director for Thomson Reuters in Africa. The main sponsors of this year's conference are focusing on building a shared understanding of best practices in land governance. Mr. Nichols, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, let's begin by talking about, when you talk about Thomson Reuters, in most cases it's all about news. I didn't know that you guys are doing more than just news.
Yeah, that's a common reaction when people hear about us from the news. But what I really like and I'm really excited about in Africa for our business, particularly Paul, is we are a company that has a broad depth of businesses and that we really empower economic growth on the continent through those unique businesses. So first, we have our financial information business. We provide information to investors, banks, et cetera, on what's going on in Africa and give them technology tools to make those investments. We also then go into our legal information and provide legal transparency, access to the rule of law for citizens on the continent, and create efficiencies in court case systems across the continent. And then what we're here talking about in Washington this week is our land information systems through our Thomson Reuters Omentum solution. And what we've done in Uganda is apply that technology to increase the transparency around who owns land, and then also increase the efficiency of the government that operates there.
I was about to ask you about what is taking place here in Washington. What is the relevancy of Thomson Reuters? You're one of the main sponsors of the conference. Maybe briefly tell us the significance of this conference being held in Washington.
Well, the conference is really about bringing multiple parties together to share best practices. So the World Bank Conference on Land and Poverty is what we're here, and we're one of the main sponsors of the event. But it's really to bring private sector, public sector, governments, aid agencies together to share best practices around land information systems, the access to property rights, gender inclusion, financial inclusion, et cetera, all things to help grow the economy. And it's not just Africa, it's across the world, but there is a huge focus on Africa in this particular conference. How
can land reform, especially on the African continent, spur economic growth or reduce poverty?
I mean, really, when we talk about land rights, it's fundamental in terms of really building an economy literally from the ground up. And it's talking about, if you don't know who owns the land, investors won't want to invest in it. Banks won't want to securitize mortgages against it. People won't want to trade land. They won't want to invest in their own land because they feel the government may take it away from them, or if they feel that somebody else has claim to that land. Economic development really does start with true knowing who owns the land. And again, the Thomson Reuters solution, Omentum, that we've implemented in Uganda, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Liberia, et cetera, it helps empower that through the use of technology and creates that transparency both internally in the government and to the citizens of a country to say that they know who owns the land and there is a transparent process around it.
What kind of impact do you think these land reforms are actually having on the continent? Let's even break it down to the people.
I think from an individual citizen's perspective, it's huge. I mean, in the sense that you have confidence that you have title to that individual piece of land. We see it throughout the continent. I see it personally where, in certain countries, people will go and buy a piece of land, and then 6 months later they'll find out that somebody else holds title to that land, and then it creates this huge backlog in the legal system about who owns the land, who has use to the land. I've sold it to reuse it to do other things. And so really the individual citizen benefits hugely from this, as again, applying our technology, creating that transparency that an average citizen can go on the web or go down to the land registry office and get the information from them, and everybody has the same information. There's not multiple registries.
On that note, we are running out of time, but thank you so much, Mr. Keith Nichols, for joining Africa 54 and for your insight. That was Mr. Keith Nichols, Managing Director for Thomson Reuters in Africa.